Before neon lights, before television, before weekend shopping trips, faith once set the rhythm of American life. In the year 1900, religious festivals in America were not just dates on a calendar. They were the emotional center of communities, the glue of families, and the heartbeat of entire towns. At the turn of the 20th century, the United States was a nation in transition. Factories were rising, cities were growing, and immigrants were arriving by the millions. Yet despite the pull of modernization, religious life remained deeply rooted in everyday existence. For Americans in 1900, religious festivals were not passive observances. They were immersive, communal, and often exhausting in the most meaningful way. Sunday itself was sacred. Long before major religious holidays arrived, Americans were already conditioned to structure their lives around faith. Shops closed, streets quieted, families dressed in their best clothes and walked, sometimes miles, to attend church. The sound of church bells was more powerful than any clock, signaling not just the time, but a shared moral rhythm. When major religious festivals arrived, that rhythm intensified. Christmas in 1900 America looked very different from the commercial spectacle it would later become. There were no flashing decorations lining suburban rooftops, no shopping malls blasting music weeks in advance. Instead, Christmas was intimate and reverent. For many Protestant families, the holiday centered on church services, scripture readings, and quiet family meals. Trees were decorated with handmade ornaments, apples, popcorn strings, paper stars. Gifts, if exchanged at all, were modest: a book, a scarf, a handmade toy. In rural communities, Christmas celebrations often lasted an entire day, sometimes spilling into the next. Neighbors visited one another on foot or by horse-drawn wagon, carrying baked goods or preserves. Carols were sung not by professional choirs, but by ordinary people whose voices echoed through wooden churches and candlelit homes. For children, the magic of Christmas came not from abundance, but from attention, from being seen by parents, grandparents, and the wider community. Easter carried a different kind of emotional weight. In 1900, Easter was less about colorful eggs and more about spiritual renewal. Many Americans observed Lent seriously, abstaining from certain foods or pleasures for weeks beforehand. Easter Sunday marked a release, a celebration of sacrifice, resurrection, and hope. Sunrise services were common, especially in Protestant communities. Worshippers gathered early in the morning, sometimes outdoors, to greet the day together. Women wore carefully prepared dresses, often sewn by hand. Men arrived in pressed suits, despite having worked physically demanding jobs all week. The effort itself was part of the devotion. After church, families shared large meals, and children were allowed small treats that felt extraordinary after weeks of restraint. In Catholic communities, many of them immigrants from Ireland, Italy, Poland, and Germany, religious festivals were even more elaborate. Feast days honoring saints were major events. Processions filled streets with prayer, music, and symbolic rituals. Statues were carried, candles were lit, and entire neighborhoods participated. These festivals were not only acts of faith, but declarations of identity in a country where immigrants often felt invisible or unwelcome. In cities like New York, Boston, and Chicago, ethnic parishes became cultural anchors. Religious festivals allowed immigrants to preserve language, food, and tradition while slowly adapting to American life. A feast day might include Mass in the morning and a communal meal in the afternoon, blending sacred ritual with social survival. Jewish Americans, many of whom had arrived recently from Eastern Europe, observed religious festivals with equal intensity. In 1900, Jewish life in America was still deeply traditional. Holidays like Passover, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur structured the year. Passover, in particular, was a powerful reminder of collective memory. Families gathered around tables, reciting stories of liberation that mirrored their own journeys from hardship to hope. Even as they worked long hours in factories or shops, many Jewish families closed businesses for holy days despite financial pressure. Faith was not a hobby, it was a responsibility. Children learned rituals at home, not from textbooks. Elders guided ceremonies, ensuring continuity across generations. Religious festivals also served as moral education. In 1900, there were no social media campaigns, no constant news feeds shaping values. Instead, sermons, prayers, and communal rituals transmitted ideas about right and wrong. Ministers and priests addressed real-life struggles, poverty, alcoholism, family conflict, through religious language that people understood deeply. In small towns, religious festivals blurred the line between sacred and social life. Church picnics, harvest festivals, and holiday gatherings brought together entire communities, regardless of denomination. These events strengthened social bonds and created informal support networks. If a family fell on hard times, the church often noticed first. Importantly, religious festivals in 1900 were physically demanding. People stood for long services, knelt on hard floors, fasted, walked long distances, and prepared meals from scratch. Participation required effort, and that effort created meaning. Faith was not consumed, it was practiced. Children grew up watching adults take these rituals seriously. There was no sense that religion was optional or private. It was public, shared, and visible. This visibility created accountability. One's behavior reflected not only on oneself, but on one's family and congregation. As America moved closer to the modern age, some tensions emerged. Industrial schedules sometimes conflicted with religious observance. Younger generations questioned traditions. But in 1900, the old ways still held strong. Religious festivals acted as anchors in a rapidly changing world, offering stability when everything else felt uncertain. Looking back, what feels most surprising is not the absence of modern conveniences, but the presence of meaning. Religious festivals were not escapes from life, they were frameworks for understanding it. They marked time, shaped identity, and reminded people that they belonged to something larger than themselves. In 1900 America, faith did not compete with daily life, it organized it. And for millions of Americans, religious festivals were not just celebrations of belief, they were rehearsals of community, memory, and hope in a nation still learning who it was becoming.